in John chapter 5 this morning. I encourage you guys to turn there with me, John chapter 5. And a reminder, we will not be meeting this Wednesday night. If you normally come to Wednesday nights, we do have Wednesday night services, and we're going through the Old Testament. We do encourage you guys to come out for that. This Wednesday night, if you show up, you're automatically a VBS volunteer. Just saying, you're it. Maybe I shouldn't have announced that. I just put this book down and then it showed up again. Same book. Okay. All right. Okay, so John chapter 5. Let's go ahead and pray. And we'll get right into the teaching. Dear Lord, we do ask this morning, as we're talking about healing, emotional, physical, and spiritual healing, God, that you would heal. Not only that you would, Lord, we know you're able, we know you're willing, but that we would want to be. No longer offering up excuses, but moving forward in our walks, which can be a scary place. So may it be, Lord, that you just move in this room, that we may be more powerful, open to, effective for your kingdom. And that when eternity comes our way, that we would just be so much more ready for it as well. And so as we look at this passage again, by your Spirit, just minister to our hearts, we'd pray. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right, John chapter 5, looking at verse 1. And it reads this: After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So here we are in John chapter 5. The previous chapter, remember, John isn't going absolutely time-wise chronologically because he's bringing in specific miracles to prove that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, the Messiah, God in the flesh. So he's writing different than the synoptic gospels. And so some time has passed. He was in the south. He was baptizing. There was a conflict with John the Baptist's disciples. He heads up north. He goes smack dab through the middle of Samaria, ministers to the Samaritan woman. We spent quite a bit of time on that, how he reached out to what would be called today the worst of the worst and gave her living water to share with others. And she did, and started a revival. And then from there, he went up through Nazareth into Cana in the north. And he ends up ministering to a nobleman by healing his son. And then it says, after some time, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And so there were 7 feasts in the Jewish calendar. And they're all marked out there in Deuteronomy that they were supposed to celebrate. But 3 of these feasts were mandatory for the head of the home or the head of the clan or the adult males to go to Jerusalem. And in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16, it tells us it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread, also Passover. Those are right next to each other. The Feast of Weeks or Pentecost, 50 days later. And then the Feast of Tabernacles. And they would go to Jerusalem and they would camp out, celebrating how God took care of them in the wilderness and a remembrance of that. But it was very important for them to go to keep the country unified, because they were all in different tribes. They were spread out all over the place. They didn't have, Jerusalem News Network or anything like that. They didn't have Facebook to check out what's happening in the world. They actually would come together and find out what was going on in the nation. And it also kept them unified spiritually. So spiritually, God would minister to them through these times, and it would keep them on the same page, even though they were very spread out in an ancient land. God was the God of all of them, and so they were required to come. Very much like Sunday mornings. We come together as a whole church, even though during the week you get a lot more in-depth studies. We got young adults Thursday night. We got men's groups, Tuesday, women's groups. We got koinonia fellowships. We got all these other things going on, but we come together so that we're on the same page as a church together. And it is probably the least effective way to teach. I talk, you listen kind of thing, but it's actually very important for the unity of the body. And that's why we come together in a large group like this. And so they would come up. Now, I want you to note, though, Jesus never broke the law that God laid out for him. But the traditions of men, he would often break, right? We're going to see at the end of this passage we're looking at today that he heals a man on the Sabbath. No. You don't do that if you're a good Jew. But Jesus did that as the perfect man. Why? He's following the edicts of God, but not the edicts of man, right? There's other time when they were hungry and they walked through the wheat field and on a Sabbath day, and they were taking the wheat and they were getting the sunflower seeds out of it, basically. They were a little bit hungry, and so they're getting a little snack. And they told him, well, you're harvesting on the Sunday. It was fine for Jesus to do so because he wasn't breaking God's law, he was breaking man's law. Now, this is important because many of us will cast off restraint and will say, well, I don't have to do that. That's legalistic, right? And so we take all these freedoms. But at the same time, you need to have a balance because you do have this, yes, I am free and I don't have to follow man's laws. I'm not wearing a tie. For a long time, suit and tie was mandatory for church, right? And you had to have an organ. And if you're over 50 years old, ladies, you had to have purple hair or something. You know, it's just like you just had these things that were going on. They were the traditions of man. The Jews had so many traditions. It was just absolutely heavy weight. But at the same time, you don't throw everything off. Say, well, I'm free in Christ. Because remember, Paul said all things are permissible, but not all things are profitable. All things are permissible, but I will not be brought under the mastery of anything. You know, and Jesus also said, be ye holy, therefore, because I am holy. And so holiness is actually important to God. So you're not legalistic if you're actually trying to live a good life either. But you need to be balanced out here to understand you are under grace. You can't be perfect, but your desire is to please God who is holy. And for him to watch what he's doing through his power in your life and to actually be different in a world that needs to see something different, right? And that's what draws people. So Jesus was a law keeper, but only really the laws of God. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to be that which God wants us to be. At the same time, not with legalism, okay? And so he's going up as a feast to one of these feasts that he is required to go to as the head, the male head of his own family. In fact, his mother's husband died, Joseph, his stepfather, died, and so he was the male leader in that family, so he would need to be represented at these three feasts. So he went down to the feast. Now it says in verse 2, it says, now there is in Jerusalem a sheep gate by a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. Now Jerusalem, there's a pool called Bethesda, like it said, and it means house of mercy. There's a whole neighborhood on the north end in ancient Jerusalem that was called Bethesda, or house of mercy, or area of mercy. Interesting to note, Bethesda, Maryland is named after this area of Jerusalem, and specifically the pool. And so if you're in the military, you might end up at Bethesda Hospital, which is Hospital of Mercy, right? Good name. Healing points. Title of my message today. There's 7 things we're going to look at about Jesus' healing in this particular instance. Number 1, his healing is merciful, and he's actually going to the pool of mercy to do it. And it is interesting that he's doing this. Again, very specific miracles that John brings forth for us to glean as many lessons as we can. But you need to understand, for God to heal us, for God to move in our lives, we can't say, God, I'm so good, move in my life. You can't say, God, I deserve it, now move in my life. We have to rely upon God's mercy towards us. It can't be based on our goodness, or he would never heal. It has to be based upon his mercy, and the power of it is his grace. He is able to forgive us our sins. He's able to look at us and say, I'm going to take care of that thing that came through sin. Maybe not your sin, but all sickness and death comes through sin. He died to wipe that out. Therefore, he has the ability to heal even beforehand, because in God's mind, it's already a done deal, right? And so he heals us based on mercy, and he shows up at the pool of mercy in order to heal. And this is actually where this pool of mercy is. So this way is north, and then this way is south, east, and west. When Jesus comes back, he's going to land on the Mount of Olives out here, and he's going to enter the Temple Mount through the east gates and enter into the temple, the rebuilt temple, which is facing east, or the sunrise, which is very typical in those days. And so here would be the western wall that you see a lot of pictures of. Anyway, so that's ancient Israel, and they didn't think those pools existed until in the 1888 they actually dug up the pools, and you can actually go there and see the pools. And so this is where the pools are. The crucifixion took place up here. Others would argue over here. I think it's up here, Fortress of Antonio, which is now a nunnery. You can go actually step on the rocks in the courtyard. There used to be the courtyard where Jesus' back was ripped open, and you can actually see the stones that were there in those days. And then here's the Temple Mount, okay? And so he was walking up, and he went to this pool of Bethesda, and he brought this healing. Now in verse 3, it goes on to say, in these these porches that are around these pools, lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. And so at this pool up there, Bethesda, there was a stirring of the water. And this is an example of where the Bible is just giving a report on what people believed. It's not saying that this is where they actually got healed and it was an angel that healed them or whatever. It's just saying this is what people would do. This is what they all believed. In fact, some of your Bibles out there don't have those details in it. It seems like someone came by and said, all these people are by this pool because of this. Okay? And it seems like maybe it was written in possibly a little bit later. So you might have a little discrepancy. But nonetheless, people believed that those pools brought healing when they were stirred. And it might be just the wind. It might be a tremor. It might be some, activity going on around them where the pool would ripple. But what would happen is people would jump into the pool then hoping that they would be healed. And this is just a tradition that took place amongst them, right? But I do want you to note that God will use something powerless in and of itself as a point of contact to release or to spur on someone's faith in God. Okay? And that seems weird, right? But I do want to challenge you with something. When you pray, can you pray sitting down in a reclining chair? But how do you normally pray? You normally sit up and bow your head, don't you? Because it brings something, a physical position brings a change of attitude because we are physical, emotional, and spiritual all mixed into one. So sometimes when you're really serious about prayer, what do? You get on your knees, right? And there's a reverence that comes through your body because your physical is connected with your spiritual and your attitude changes. Sometimes during worship, can I worship God seriously without raising my hands? But there's a release and a freedom when I raise my hands. It's like I'm sitting there singing to my dad. And it's a release, and I love doing it. Okay? And so sometimes we have this physical that affects our spiritual. And the thing is, it's not theologically correct. God will move, though, even when we're not theologically correct. Here's the deal. If you're waiting for God to move in your life until you're perfectly theologically correct, he's never going to move in your life. Except for mine. Just kidding. No. But he never will because you won't be theologically. So God, in his grace, is able to look at our wrong ideas and still move, right? And we're so glad that he does because we're so inadequate and God is so much greater than we are and almost impossible to even begin to get a grasp of. And he's explaining things that are so far above our heads. And so they're thinking archaically, but we still kind of think the same way in different things, right? Now also, we see other examples of this. Remember the woman with the issue of blood? And she just thought, man, if I reach out and I touch a rabbi's hem, God's going to heal me. The hem didn't heal her. We don't have a hem touching ministry in this church. I don't walk around with robes with these lines across the bottom waiting for people to grab out and touch my hem because I'm the pastor or whatever. We don't do that. But that woman felt a need to do so. But she was believing in God for the healing, and God brought the healing because a physical touch for her helped her just have a little bit more faith. And so sometimes these things happen. Gross thing happened in Acts chapter 19. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about this, but Paul was a tent maker, so he'd work all day, and then he'd be sweating, making these tents, no deodorant back then, and they would bring sweatbands from Paul, and people would touch them and be healed. But same type of thing. Okay, so this isn't so ridiculous. Okay, so this rumor or this belief led many sick, lame, and blind and withered to stay by this pool continually. And so here you have this man who's been sick for 38 years, and he's laying by the healing pool. Now I want you to know, when God heals somebody, very often it's someone that's been sick for 38 years or longer, or something radical, right? They got a shriveled hand and it's obvious. It's not just like, oh, you're healed of something internal, like you declare them to have, stomach cancer and then they're healed, and you claim a healing, but they've never been diagnosed with it, right? They just claim they have it, and then they're healed by it. No, this is real. When the Lord does it, he's not afraid to really do it. And so he shows mercy upon this man. Verse 6 then goes on. It says, when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, he said to him, do you want to be made well? That's a kind of a dumb question, right? Here goes Jesus again, right? Messing with people. What is he doing? He's looking into the man's heart. He's looking into the man's heart. And he asks him a question that seems foolish to us, but it's a very insightful question to ask this man to reveal something in him. So he says, do you want to be? Is it your will? Do you have it in mind to be resolved or determined, to desire to purpose, to wish for, to be healed? Do you really have a desire to become healed? Do you really want to get well? What's he asking? Well, he's asking a question that the man needs to hear because Jesus is insightful. He's reaching deeper. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. He's also thorough. Again, this man has an obvious need for a healing. The Lord is insightful. He's going deeper. Do you really want to be healed? Do you really want to change? And sometimes we, as faulty human beings, don't want to change. We want to hold on to things. And we'll come for prayer. Oh, Lord, help me to love my wife more. But we kind of like the fact that we're being mean to our wives because if we're nice to them, we might have to do our honey-do list. I don't know, whatever, or we might do more, or we might give her more control in our life, and we just kind of separated that out, and I'm selfish, and I want to kind of keep her at a distance, or whatever it is. A lot of times people have spiritual and emotional problems. They don't really want healed. Anger is an interesting emotion because anger divorces you from compassion, mercy, empathy, and feeling, right? And so if someone has hurt you and now you're angry with them, they can't hurt you because you're mad at them. But to forgive them and to be healed of that ugliness in your life, now all of a sudden you have to let them back in again. But you just want to hold on to it because it's powerful. And you don't have to think about them, and you don't have to care, and you can just be mad. And people will hold on to that one for decades, a grudge. The roots of bitterness, people hold on to it, and they don't really want to be healed because it makes them feel good, and that person can't hurt them anymore, right? But they're holding on to something that the Lord would want to get out of them. And so the Lord is thorough. So even though this man has a physical ailment, the Lord's digging deeper, and he's going to minister to the spiritual and emotional element. And I want you to think about this. Every person that's been healed physically eventually dies, right? But when they're healed emotionally and spiritually, does that part of them actually last into eternity? So it's a permanent healing when someone is emotionally and spiritually healed. And so God actually goes deeper, is more thorough. So he has the insight to go deeper. And so it's possible that this man has actually been satisfied inside with not being healthy. Why? He's lazy, or he's afraid to work himself, possibly. So someone's been taking care of him for 38 years. 38 years. He hasn't had to take care of himself. And perhaps he's at the pool just to satisfy those who care for them. I'll sit by the pool and claim I tried to jump in when the waters moved, but they really didn't move. Oh, woe is me. When's dinner? Some people don't really want a job, but those that are able and young enough and healthy enough to be able to get a job need to work, right? But there's a lot of people out there that think, oh, mom and dad are still housing me. I'm still getting unemployment or whatever, and I'm just going to not work at all. And I'm not saying, that those catch nets are horrible things all the time, but when you abuse them, they are. They are bad things. So some people don't want to get a job because they got it pretty easy. They don't have to work. And so the Lord's merciful. He's going to reach out. He's insightful, and he's thorough. He's digging deeper than we want him to necessarily go. But he cares so much that he wants more for us. You know that love demands more? The reason it's okay for your kid to get a B and not mine is because those are my kids. You understand how that is? You know, you push those that you love, and the Lord loves us so much, he's going to be deeper. He's going to be more thorough in our lives. And sometimes we want a partial healing, but not all the way, you know? In a little book called Expectation Corner, it tells of a king who prepared a city for some of the poorer subjects. And he constructed a large storehouse not far away where everything they needed would be supplied if they would only send a request. All they had to do was ask, and it would be delivered. The catch, though, was that they had to be waiting for the package when it was delivered. Otherwise, it'd just be taken back to the warehouse. And so a faithless man was making a request, just writing, I'd like this, I'd like this, I'd like this. But he didn't believe the king was willing or able to supply his need. So he was never home and caring to receive the gifts. One day he took a tour of the warehouse, and there was a whole corner full of everything that he had asked for. But it had never gotten to him because he didn't really believe that the Lord was, or his Lord was willing or able. Is that how you pray? You just throw prayers out there and whatever, you know? Lord, heal me of my alcoholism as you drive him to the bar. You know, it's like, I really don't want a healing, but I'll just throw it out there because I'm supposed to pray that way, right? You need to pray in faith. And so we need to examine from time to time just how much of our heart is in what we're asking for. How far do you want to go with it? Women, it's like you, or men, whoever, you want to get over gossiping and talking about people behind their backs or in front of their face, get rid of Facebook. Can't do that. I'd like it to change, but I really can't do it. No, you can. You can get rid of internet. You can get rid of cable. Oh, but I have to use it for work. So use it at work. Come home without it. Right? Why not get radical? You know, sometimes we ask for the healing, but we really don't want it because it's become our comfort zone or our thumb-sucking response. But check out John 15:7. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire, and it shall be done for you. Sounds like a magic potion, right? But read that verse again. It says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask for what you desire, and it shall be done for you. The most important part of that verse is getting the word of God into us. And then our desires become God's desires for us. Many times people will come forward for prayer. And, oh, Pastor, I want to love my wife more. And I'll look at you and I'll just say, God wants to answer that prayer. You just need to be willing. He will answer that prayer. You just need to be willing. It's not God who's a stick in the mud on this one. It's you, dude. You know, God wants to answer that prayer. And then you can pray that prayer in confidence, knowing that God will answer that. It's up to you to reject it or not. See how that works? And so many things we do, we push back and we reject. Another verse that is often misquoted and misunderstood is 1 John 5:14. This is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have the petitions that we have asked of him. Pastor, pray for me because I just want to be used by the Lord more. Does God want to answer that prayer? Oh, yeah, he does. How willing are you in faith? And are you praying that prayer with belief that God will? And are you sending your will or laying it down before the Lord saying, please use me in that way? Now in verse 7, it goes on to say, the sick man answered him. So he asked him, do you want to be made well? He says, sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred, but while I am coming, another steps down before me. It's not my fault. I'm a victim. Well, how do you know that, Rod? Well, listen, this guy hasn't worked for 38 years. Are there people taking care of him? You know, the people, whoever's couch he's lounging on every night, you think they would be there waiting to throw him into the pool if he just asked them? You know? There were people to help because it's not logical to say, people wouldn't help me. Hey, he's still alive after 38 years. He's still plugging away after 38 years of being infirmed. He has people to help him. Again, Jesus is nailing him in his heart when he asks him whether he really wants to be healed. And I want you to know, this shows the Lord's persistence. You know, I'm guilty of, I'm sure some of you are, like kind of trying to push God away. Weird thing about God is he always comes back. And he's always pressing in on me. Not because he hates me, but because he loves me. If you've ever backslid, you've understood this in a radical way, haven't you? You try to push God away, and he just keeps on coming back. Man, he is the hound of heaven. He's got your scent, and he ain't letting you go. He's persistent. You only get so far by making excuses, and all you're really doing is delaying the Lord's persistence. Be honest. Accept the truth that brings maturity in your life, and deal with what God wants to heal in your life. So this man makes up an excuse. What does Jesus do? He says to him, rise up, take up your bed, and walk, verse 8. Point number 5, he's definitive. He speaks with authority. He commands it, get up and walk. And God told him to do what he could not do. Has God ever told you to do something you can't do? The disciples, on the night Jesus was betrayed, they were starting to get ready for the meal. Feet were grimy, gross, and dirty. Yesterday I played ultimate frisbee without shoes on, and I hurt my foot and my back. So people prayed for me first service. I'm better. But I got home and my feet were grimy. But it'd be way worse than that day because they were walking everywhere, not on nice grass like I was on. And so Jesus comes into this meeting. No one's washing each other's feet, and Jesus washes their feet. You know the story, right? And then he tells them, what I've done for you, you guys do for each other. Is that beyond them to be able to do that? Remember, they're arguing about who will be the greatest in the kingdom. James and John sent their mom to petition on their behalf. Send mom in, mom power. She'll get Jesus to do it, right? It is beyond them. And God told them to do something beyond themselves. What else Jesus tell us? You want to be great in God's kingdom? Be a servant of all. How many of you guys are naturally servants? If you want to gain your life, lose your life. How many of you guys are just willingly out there losing your life in the flesh? You don't do it, right? You're always about yourself. Number one, and the world teaches us to do that. The Spirit of God, the teaching of Jesus, and the ability to mature and grow allows you to become more like Jesus and carriers of his character, right? You can't do that on your own. God always asks us to live beyond what we can't do. Rod and Noreen moved to Texas. No, we're from California. Can't do that. Daniel and Maria moved to Morocco. Kenneth and Letty moved to Peru. Hey, take $500 and support a missionary. Can't do that. Right? It's beyond us. So many of these things are beyond us to be selfless and to step out in faith or to help someone else step out in faith at cost to us. We can't do it, but the Lord asks us to do it, and we do it. Why? Our power or his? But how many times do we resist? How different does our life look if we don't resist as compared to when we do resist? I'd love to see what I look like when I don't resist. I don't know that yet because I still resist God at certain points. And so you see him calling him to the impossible. God does that. But it is so fun to live beyond what you're able. And so Jesus clearly speaks with authority, and he challenges them to do the impossible. But my next point is the Lord's command is his empowering. He empowers us to do that which he calls us to do. He doesn't tell us to do something that we can't do without giving us the power to do it. He will give you the power to do the impossible in your life. And he tells this man, get up off the mat, pick it up, and walk away. When you respond to the Lord's command in faith, he enables you to do it. So what are you going to do the next time the Lord challenges you to do something beyond yourself? Do it. That's living in faith. That's experiencing the true Christian walk. But you need to understand, it isn't always scaling mountain. In fact, it rarely is that. Normally, it's an internal spiritual battle within yourself. And people might not even notice it. And it's between you and God. But that's what brings out fulfillment, maturity, and effectiveness in your life. And it brings satisfaction when you obey what God calls you to do. Verse 9 goes on in chapter 5, and it says, immediately the man was made well. He took up his bed, and he walked. And then it says, and that day was the Sabbath. That's important because next time we get together, we're going to talk about Jesus breaking the Sabbath as far as man's traditions go. But my final point is Jesus was accessible. There were a multitude of needy people who were there, but none of them looked to Jesus. You need to understand something about the character of God. He has this omnipresence about him, which means he's everywhere at all times. And he has to be because he's God. So you got God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. They're everywhere at all times. Their name is what? I am. I'm ever present, who was and is to be. So the thing is, every person on earth, and whether they're in the middle of Iran or the middle of China, God is available to them. They can't hide from his presence. There's a with experience of the Holy Spirit. He is with everybody. If you're a Christian, he's in you. And if you're a Christian who's asked for it, he's upon you in power. But he's with every person. He is accessible. Ask, seek, and knock. The Lord is there. And he is accessible. Now, what we have here is a physical picture of Jesus being right on the scene, a bunch of needy people around, and they're not even looking at Jesus. They're looking at something else. They're looking at the pool. They're looking at something that they're supposed to do. This is what religion does. Every single religion is the same. It's all about you doing something, and so you're looking at your duty to be saved. Christianity is looking at Jesus. And this man looks at Jesus, and he's healed. But everybody else there is not looking in the right way. What do you need to be? What do you need to do to be saved? You need to be a whoso or a he who, right? Good way to remember it. John 3:16, whosoever believeth. And he who believes, John 1:18, he who. So you a whoso or a he who, or both? I'd like to be both. I want to make sure I'm in. Spurgeon says of this passage, he said about these people at the pool, that they were there and there was Christ, one who could heal them, but not a single one of them sought him. Their eyes were fixed on the water, expecting it to be troubled. They were so taken up with their own chosen way that the true way was neglected. All of them waiting for something spectacular instead of looking to Jesus. He was there, and they missed him. Don't miss out. God comes knocking. What are you looking at? What are you doing? What's going on? Let him in. Received. What are you waiting for? People wait for a lot of things. For a more convenient season. Friend of my wife's, we shared with him one night, and he thought, that's great, I want that. He goes, but I got a bunch of Coke I still got to sell. A more convenient time. Not Coca-Cola, Coke, the kind that you sniff up your nose. If you're that innocent, God bless you. The guy ended up, the guy did get saved. But he pushed a more convenient time. Wait till I'm old and I've had my fun. Right? I've done way too many funerals for young men riding motorcycles too fast. And it's just, no, you don't want to wait for a more convenient time, and you'll never regret doing it now. But you guys, as a believer, that includes emotional and spiritual healing to bring more satisfaction and fullness. Don't wait for a more convenient time. Dreams and vision. Oh, I know I should, get rid of pornography in my life, but the Lord hasn't showed me it's time yet. Or I know I shouldn't be a drunk or an adulterer or whatever. Don't wait for dreams and visions. The Bible's pretty clear on a lot of things. You need healing. Signs and wonders. Some wait to be compelled when I feel like it. Some wait for a revival. Some wait for particular feelings. I don't feel like it. Some wait, I'll give my heart to the Lord when Billy Graham shows up in town. What if he doesn't make it? The Lord wants to heal. Don't wait. Start now. This man could have pushed Jesus off and not been healed. Do you want to be made well, not just for salvation, but for wholeness? Not every sick person wants to be healed. Ladies, some of you in here are carrying a heavy load of bitterness, and you need to let go. It will make you vulnerable again, but you need to let go. You need to. Some of you are holding on to insecurities. You need to let go. You need to trust God. Some of you are holding on to sinful habits. You need to let go. Let the Lord use you more. Some of you are, feel a call in your life to do something radical for God, and you're holding on to your house, your job, your security, your bank account, whatever it is. Man, you send it up ahead, and the stock market can't crash it. Don't wait for a more convenient time to step out and say, God, all of me, living sacrifice, here I am. So God, through Jesus, as Jesus, dealt with this man who had his heart withered as well as his body, and he healed both. We need to allow the Lord to heal us, even as believers. And I want the healing today. I want it now, because I don't know when the Lord's coming back, and I want to be effective for the King now. I know that most of my satisfaction and my frustrations don't come from other people. They come from within me, because I'm holding on to things and I'm just not letting them go. And we need that healing. And some of you are in that place. And so what we're going to do is, as Chris and Bethany and CT come back up and lead worship for us, is I asked some couples to come up to pray. And we're just going to have an extended time of worship where you guys can be prayed for. And you can come up. You don't have to say what it's specifically about. Or you can say what it's specifically about. We're not going to talk a long time. We want God to move. Okay? And we're going to pray for you to see what God might do in your life. And so I'd encourage you guys, if you guys need prayer, we want to pray for you today. And again, you can sit there in your chair and pray, but there's something, again, about getting up and coming forward and praying with some of the leaders in the church, just to say, hey, God, I'm here. I'm taking this step, and I really want what you have for me. I'm no longer going to straight arm you and push you away. Here I am. I'm surrendered. I'm a living sacrifice unto you, and I want to be everything that you have for me. And so if you're not a believer, obviously you need to be healed of all your sin. We'd love to pray with you. But if you're here and you're just struggling, you're holding on, you're afraid to let go, or if you have a physical ailment you just need prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. So let's go ahead and spend some time in